That's the big thing. Just roll my plan. Anyways, I just say over one day. That's a all the time at 10 o'clock. Yeah, I have to get Maria. I have to call. I'm looking at the I'm gonna recuperate. I'm gonna just originally I was gonna be off tomorrow, and I go to up an hour away from me. Sister-in-laws. Potatoes. Oh, potatoes are very good. I think I still have one thing that had like 4 big quarters coming out. And I found that. Wow, it was like a lot of them. Yeah, nice. Yeah, just for a couple minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, we had good weather. I think now it's when it was good.
yeah.
Yeah, the squash is really.
Yeah,
got scorched.
And it's
It
heat.
really dropped off.
Yeah.
I got some seeds left over. I'm gonna put some.
Squash mines.
I don't think it was heat. It was just dry, too dry. So I got some seeds left over. I'm gonna put a couple more hills in now.
Dennis at HRG.
Been there a couple years.
Dennis still that teacher.
You know, September.
Yeah, it's always.
Maybe, I don't know. I'll keep the seeds till next year.
So they do lima beans.
Yeah,
It's a really good lima
We did
bean.
we did green beans.
Okay.
They were, we got this.
I'm with David Mills.
Seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Related to
down
you?
there.
It's related to you.
I think somewhere distant, not
Okay.
close.
But yeah, we were out there, oh, it's been like 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, and it's time for us to plant beans. We can
Fill this out.
talk with other guys and said, no, we want to cruise these. I said, no. We went over and it's called Jade. J-A-D. Those suckers are like that long and they're straight.
Oh, yeah.
They were.
Do they all come at once then?
Well, there's,
Because
no, because I had
When
I had 2 really heavy pickings, like a week apart.
Okay.
And then the third time, fewer.
Yeah.
That's what. But they.
They gave
They
us a
were excellent.
variety last year, I think it was, that they all came like at one time, which we had a lot.
I don't get a report.
And then it was pretty much one picking and they were.
No, these were a couple pickings and then of course, by
No, we've been, yeah.
the third one came along. Starting to get those, well, you get the bean beetles.
They get a little rusty color.
They get lacy leaves and stuff, so it's time to get them out. We have. I don't know if we put. I think we put up like 50 plants or something. That'll keep us for a couple of years.
We don't do lima beans, but friends of ours do. And they were just tickled. But they're just such, it takes forever to haul them. I'm considering, but I do like the garden lima beans so much better than this. I can't even eat this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, the best thing.
Fine,
Say,
can.
I don't know. So
First
he's
thing,
I never.
was a little spoiled with that.
I don't know.
So he's home again?
Let's see, it's 1, 2, 3.
Well, forget his first name.
That's you, I think.
How are you doing?
Oh.
Have we got?
Yeah.
It's like Christmas.
Think of it in a minute.
That's like, it's pretty nice, huh? Yeah, it is.
You were?
I was just telling him I come from Marcus family, right? And he was the one during independence.
Yeah.
He was here. Government, yeah, things when. Oh, you missed out on some of those people. There was a few.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
That was a fun time. I would come to all those meetings and just sit in the audience.
Be entertained.
Come to the supervisors meeting because that's when the whole the heliport thing was going on.
Because I work for High.
Brett was here. Supervisor.
Am I throwing spot?
Are you here? All right.
Or whenever you
They
want to.
switched sides
Okay.
for me.
Just that one.
Yeah, they got.
Oh, this is here.
This is it?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, whose laptop is this?
Yep. Yeah, just abstain. Okay.
How are you doing?
Yep.
Good.
When's your due date?
About 6 weeks.
Oh, I'm getting there.
So we're getting there.
Julie,
Hey,
it feels hot then.
it's these 90-degree, 90-degree days are fun.
Might be a conflict.
What? Yeah, I
Oh,
didn't
4 o'clock.
didn't actually notice. I just noticed all the
That
text
one's,
messages from my
yeah.
Xfinity.
Yeah.
I was starting to go through this.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, so I'm not
Right,
connected.
you know.
But when you start.
Yeah.
So I tried another router.
Yeah.
Start TV on.
Yeah. That would be
I
frustrating.
think it came back at 6:10.
Was there a line down?
Well, I noticed them working.
So these are the new ones.
across from- outside of our development on Marietta, close to the church, on our side of the road.
Okay. I
The
didn't
guy was
notice
up in a
that.
box. on the pole, So I guess he was just closing things up. I thought maybe it was just starting it off.
Yeah,
Maybe the
well,
whole
it
way out
was-
in Marietta, it just.
Because I got like the text from my phone from saying that my stuff was out, but I wasn't using it.
Surface, huh?
Try to use
This
the
is loud.
Xfinity app to go check on the troubleshoot. And it says,
To the surface.
we can't connect to your system.
I think it's just a PC.
So I did that, of course.
Surface,
So then I.
Yeah, no,
called-
it's my, so I have a Microsoft
I
Surface.
did.
Which is-
Yeah, I use T-Mobile still for our cell phone. Is your
Oh,
cell
you
phone?
do? No,
Yeah.
I have T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then I called,
Yeah.
spent 1-800, I spent whatever that number is, and then. Oh, well, that's at 7 o'clock.
Mine has
I
an
was waiting
update.
10 seconds. So Matt's not here?
That's not.
Matt's not coming in?
He never responds, so I don't
And
know.
Ann's not here.
Yeah, so. Okay.
Well, so we.
Ask
everybody
them both
can
to
vote,
vote,
both
yeah.
of them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the, what is this, August the 10th meeting of the East Hempfield Township Planning Commission. I invite you to rise and join me in opening the meeting with the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this evening's meeting, we have 2 regular members who are not present. So I would ask both Mike Rush and Joshua Volpe to be voting members for this evening. First item on our agenda would be the minutes from our last meeting, the July 13th meeting. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I would like to ask that that item E be added under action items. It was originally for Lancaster County Motors, but we were advised at the meeting that they pulled the plan or asked it to be deterred. I think it just ought to be on the record that it was there and that it was at the applicant's direction that it was not.
I'll add it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, additions regarding the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We adopt the minutes with the amendment you gave this evening.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr, seconded by Mr. Caldas, that we approve the minutes of the July, sorry, 13th meeting as amended to include the tabled or the removed agenda item for Lancaster County Motors. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
So it would be,
Abstain.
Mr. Detter was not here, abstain. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 with one abstention. All right, the first action item for this evening is State Road Commerce Park, Lot 1, revised final plan.
And good evening, Dennis Reichel with HRG. With me tonight is also Mike Davis with Barley Snyder, Ken Freed with Highview, or excuse me, Yellow Cab and Wendy's, I believe is on Zoom. And potentially Tanya with Highview will be joining us as well. Just to go over a little bit of history with this, which you are likely familiar with. We met with staff early on to discuss this project in early 2020. A subdivision and land development was approved in early 2021. That included the 7-Eleven convenience store and also a car wash. A billboard was approved by the supervisors via conditional use in late 2021. And a revised plan incorporating the billboard was approved in early 2022. A text amendment was recently approved this past May, and that allowed restaurants with drive-throughs in the enterprise zone. And to kind of summarize and bring it to completion, before you tonight is the revised plan incorporating the restaurant with drive-through that replaces the previous Lot 1 car wash. The site is located northeast of State Road and Yellow Goose Road, and it is within the enterprise zone and is allowed by right. Lot 1 is 3.7 acres and includes a 2,600 square foot restaurant. The property boundaries for Lot 1 and 3 are not changing. Lot 3 has the recently constructed 7-Eleven convenience store. There are three driveway locations that have been built at this point. State Road includes a right in, left in, and right out, and that is signed to prevent truck egress. Lot 3 includes the Yellow Goose Road, right in and right out, which is for cars only. And lot number 2 to the east includes an access drive that is full movements for cars and trucks. The site is served by public sewer and water, and all capacity has been obtained at this point. The stormwater management facilities were previously constructed. Landscape and lighting has been provided to enhance the site. We did receive the township engineer's comment letter, and we did not have any issues with that. We discussed a couple items, and we certainly will be addressing the comments. I would certainly be happy to discuss any questions if you have any.
I believe we also received LCPC's comments. Is that on this plan or was that another plan we got them on?
Should have been in the packet.
Yeah.
They're right.
My question to the applicant then is, have you seen LCPC's comments?
Yes.
And do you have any issues with anything there?
No.
Okay. Does anybody in the audience have any questions or input on this plan? Any further questions from the commission? I'm ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the revised final land development plan for State Road Commerce Park Lot 1, subject to all staff and engineering review comments.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Detter, seconded by Mr. Caldus, that we recommend approval of the revised final land development plan for State Road Commerce Park, Lot 1, revised final plan. Subject to staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So that would be unanimous, 7-0.
And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next action item is Brookside Master Plan.
Good evening, Claudia Shank from McNeese, Wallace and Nurick, here on behalf of Oak Tree Development Group in this matter, and I'm joined by Joel Young at Ratu. We have two items on your agenda this evening related to the Brookside development. The first is the master plan. You may recall at the very beginning of the development process for this site, prior to the approval of the land development plan for the hospital, we came in and presented a master plan concept to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the board. This is a requirement of your zoning ordinance. And the zoning ordinance additionally requires that it be periodically updated as changes are made. The plan that's before you this evening, and Joel will talk more about that, is largely very similar to what was previously presented, but there have been some minor adjustments as we work through the individual phases of the development, which we will review with you this evening. The plan needs to be accepted by the Board of Supervisors. So in terms of action from this Planning Commission, I don't know that the ordinance requires you to take any specific action. If you desired, you can make a recommendation that the board accept the plan. That's really the role with respect to the master plan. And then once he is finished walking you through the master plan, Joel will discuss with you the final land development plan for phase 3 of the project, which is the bank and restaurant. Obviously, we were before you just a few weeks ago to discuss the apartment phase. So now we're coming back over towards State Road to discuss the apartment and bank pad site. So I'll turn it over to Joel to talk through those items.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Good evening. I thought it'd be most efficient to do this is to show the contrasting between the last time we were before you with the master plan about 3 years ago and tonight, the 2022 master plan. What Nate just put up on the board here was the master plan the last time we were before you, which is, I believe, middle or early 2019. And you can see the plan is very similar. Again, for context, we're talking about Harrisburg Pike that runs along the south of the site, realigned State Road in this location, the hospital, which is nearing completion at this point, the Sheets, which is completed. And on the east side of Brookside, we have, at the time of the earlier master plan, 3 distribution warehouse facilities, a multifamily community at this location, 3 medical office buildings, and a commercial or retail pad location. Fast forward to the plan, we can pull up the screen. You'll see that the 2022 plan looks relatively similar. Some of the few changes, the hospital obviously is the same as is Sheets. Based on market conditions, we went ahead with a single distribution facility as opposed to 3. Market sort of gave us that direction to go with 1 building instead of 3. We actually had that in front of you a number of months ago for conditional approval, and it's conditionally approved at this point. We were before, as Claudia said, before you with a revision to the multifamily to the east as far as the configuration and size, but same location as shown on the earlier master plan. And we are about to talk to you tonight about the retail pad, this location, which is still a retail pad, but now we have specific users at the pad now, which we've submitted for land development in May and are before you tonight on that. The medical office is still in its location right now. There's been no direction yet on any specificity as far as any changes or not to that. It's our understanding it's as shown in the master plan. And that's really it. Not big changes, as you can see, main circulation patterns, configurations, sizes have pretty much stayed very similar, but we obviously want to bring you up to speed with the minor changes to make sure that you're comfortable with the master plan as we continue to move forward with the development of Brookside. Any questions?
I don't think there's any questions here. Is there anybody on Zoom here? Who are the other phone calls? Have they indicated any comments or
They're
They
two
want-
people on via phone, but no one has said
they
anything.
haven't texted in or they want to comment or anything? Okay. Let me know if they do.
They do.
Okay. As Claudia mentioned, I don't think we have to make a motion here, so I think we're satisfied at this point with the revised master plan.
Okay. Well, if
Okay.
there's any time you do have questions, by all means, you can reach out to us. We're happy to answer and that you may have in the future.
Okay.
Back.
So do you want to move on then to your phase 3, bank and restaurant?
And as just mentioned, this is phase 3 of Brookside. And this was shown in the master plan as a retail pad. We now have further developed that concept to include one building, as always shown, but 2 users. What we're proposing here is a drive-through bank about 2,600 feet to the north of the building and a small restaurant cafe really to the south of it around 2,600 square feet. You can see the location of this. The overall tract is around an acre and a half, always has been pretty much. We basically have 56 parking spaces included for this plan, which is slightly more than your ITE requires, but we basically are close to that. But we're definitely having the parking as required. We actually did submit this to the township for the emergency service to review for circulation for both emergency vehicles and of course regular circulation for the drive-through and for general parking and circulation around the site. We had submitted the plan in May and resubmitted on July 19th based on comments that we got from the township engineer and staff. And we're before you tonight with a letter from David Miller Associates dated August 3rd, last week. Its letter is predominantly administrative in nature, some minor technical comments, which we have no issues with. We're perfectly fine with it. We're addressing those few technical comments and we'll return them back to the township either this week or next week. So we'll have those in. That is the main portions of it. Of course, at this point, as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward plan. I don't know if there's any questions that the planning commission might have.
We do have 2 modifications
We
to
do,
act on
yes.
this evening, so let's take a look at those.
If you want me to go over those, I'm happy to.
Yes, please.
The first, as each planting area should contain 1 shade tree and shrubs. And basically, we're looking for a modification to have 3 planting islands without a tree in them. And that's located basically in areas where we have some crosswalk areas in this location and 1 other spot too, I believe we had that. So based on that, we're just looking for a modification of some places where we have crosswalks or sidewalks in the islands to avoid it. Trying to see if it's.
I think they're the ones on the state road side in the islands in the middle. I think there's a utility line or something that
Oh, in
crosses
the one
through there.
location, yeah, because there are
Yeah.
some utilities run through the site, so there's 1 spot where we can't put trees.
Yeah,
because of that.
and the other island had a light in it, a parking lot light, and we didn't think it made sense to have a tree covering up the light, so
Okay.
we were in agreement that it could be, the trees could be planted somewhere else on the
Hmm.
site that would be more
Mhm.
beneficial.
And on the site meetings, just this parcel or
This
the whole,
lease, I guess they're all lease parcel or
Yeah.
condos.
Yeah, the condos.
Yeah,
so this parcel, this
yeah.
unit, okay. Okay, and the second one,
And the second one is a
Regards
modification of distance between entrance into this site into center line separation is normally 150 feet. We're looking for a request of 112 based on the configuration between obviously the sheets into this location and our entrance at this location, just because of the configuration, everything we have it at 112 feet as opposed to 150. Looking at the circulation, turning radius is talked through with the township staff, and then they felt that they were comfortable with that modification being requested.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
do you have any
Plan- I have a
Sure.
plan question, but
Sure.
do you want to do the modifications
No,
first?
we can talk about plans. Sure.
Do they need a second access point?
Not for this use.
Not
in
for the
particular,
use.
no.
Okay. I was just more, I mean, yeah, it seems like a lot of stuff happening there. With one access point. There's no way to connect to the lot to the south.
Not with the topography. We actually.
Oh,
have
yeah,
the
it's
same
true.
walls. Yeah, if you drive down the state road, you begin to see the slope that we have there. So we have retaining walls that are on both sides of the tract. Both in the north, in this. Yeah, that location of both retaining walls. That's the max of 6, that's a max of 9. Most of them are shorter than that, but those are the highest points of them. And we have fencing on top of them. We felt that, one thing we wanted to make sure is that knowing that there's plenty of access all the way around the building in all directions, including bypass lanes, to make sure that there is ample circulation around the building. In addition to,
And you have a wide access point there, so.
yeah, we made sure there was ample room in that location. And this access point actually goes down to the entrance towards State Road. And then so obviously it's the connecting point, which ties into the Harrisburg Pike access, which I think we talked about last month when we were here with the apartments. So that's part of this plan. Yes.
The question, you had mentioned when you were going over it that you were a little over on the parking that was required.
Yeah.
Do you think your tenants find those extra spaces necessary, or
I think
is there an opportunity to have, less ground cover?
yeah, the big issue, it's not a lot over. I mean, over the whole entire site, it's about maybe 10 spaces, I think. I think it's 42 required, we're at 52. The biggest question was really with the restaurant to make sure that we were covering it during any kind of, higher circulation times. Like it's a cafe and it has a breakfast time. It might be good to have a few extra spaces during the morning hours when people are coming in. So we thought that on average, probably a little more, but during some peak times, it might be good to have an extra couple spaces. So that was the intent for that.
I'll ask once again, does anybody in the audience have any input to the plan? Okay. And I think first thing to do is vote on the 2 modifications.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we recommend to the supervisor's approval of modification request number 1 and 2, subject to staff and engineer comments.
Second it.
Is it Joshua? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr, seconded by Mr. Volpe, that we recommend approval of modifications 1 and 2, subject to staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So that would be unanimous, 7-0. And then for the final land development plan itself.
Well, I wish they had a second access point. I don't think it's feasible. So I'll make a motion that we recommend to the supervisor's approval of the final plan, subject to staff and engineer comments.
I'll second.
Once again, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr, seconded by Mr. Volpe, that we recommend approval of the final land development plan for Brookside Phase 3 Bank and Restaurant, subject to staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Next up is the U-Haul sketch plan.
Good evening. My name is Matt Grapes. I'm with Navarre and Wright. We're representing U-Haul moving and storage for a development along 283 and State Road. We have requested an exemption from the requirement to submit a preliminary. Feel the site meets the requirements of the minor plan and are instead proposing to submit a sketch plan and a final plan. We have submitted the sketch plan and have been responding to the engineering review comments.
And Mr. Chair, just as reference, our recommendation is positive for the relief of the preliminary plan requirement, and the other items that we included in the letter are sort of supposed to be informative or helpful for the applicant as they prepare their final plan. They aren't really like specifically deficiencies in this plan. They're supposed to be helpful hints to make that next process go a little bit quicker, just as a reference.
So could you walk us through your plan, please?
Yeah,
Through the sketch plan?
absolutely. So the plan is like I said, it's coming off a state road behind an existing convenience store, Turkey Hill there. There'll be two storage buildings. Building A and B. There'll be a section for operational truck shunting and display. And then the lower lot is the covered, what they call the covered RV parking. That's for long-term rental storage of RV units, boats, other outdoor vehicles. And then along the perimeter of the outdoor storage are exterior access singular smaller units. We're proposing the site have on-lot sewer or, on-lot septic and a water service provided by a well that's to be developed.
It's lined up, yeah.
To the right of the shaded area, those several long lines, what are they? I can't read it.
Oh, sure. That's what they refer to as the truck sharing. That's kind of the, like I said, the operational shunting. So customers coming in and out that are returning trucks, having trucks that are getting ready to be picked up. It's not a typically a rented storage area.
Okay, we do not take votes on sketch plans, but we need to make a motion, take action on the waiver or modification to eliminate the preliminary plan phase. So if there's no further discussions or questions, we can take that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We recommended the supervisor's waiver of the preliminary plan for the U-Haul project.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr, seconded by Mr. Detter, that we recommend approval of the waiver of the preliminary plan for the U-Haul project, moving and storage Lancaster. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? So that would be unanimous. Okay, good luck. Next is Barcrest Apartments Stormwater Management Plan. That's modification.
Good evening, Brent Good with ELA Group. With me tonight is Jim Schultz. He is a consultant also with the team. We work with the Steinman Foundation, who is the client, and they've established an LLC called the Little Creek Foundation, Little Conestoga Creek Foundation. This particular site is the first phase of construction that is proposed. If you look at the map, north would be to the right, and Marietta Avenue there is to the south. Barcrest Apartments is owned by High Realty. It's, as you may know, the creek is the municipal boundary for the township. East Hempfield is on the west side of the Little Conestoga Creek throughout the entire 2.7 mile corridor of our project. And so the overall project is about that 2.7 miles from starting from this particular location, and actually a little further south onto the Steinman lands, just south of the Conestoga House, is another restoration area, the start of our project, as we would say, in the southern part of the project, all the way north to the confluence of Swar Run near the Shriner Station Road, just north of the covered bridge near Park City. And this particular site is about 12 acres. We're working directly with Land Studies, who are experts with stream restoration. ELA group who I work with, our responsibility is going to be primarily the trail in a future phase. So this project is both a stream floodplain restoration, but also multimodal trail. Pedestrian and bicyclists will be able to use this. The trail will be 12 feet wide and go from this River Drive trailhead location just south of the Conestoga House. Plan to go again all the way up through to the cover bridge and northward along Shriner Station Road. We've had numerous meetings already with you and with township staff about the overall project itself. But this is the first actual phase of the project. And this is the first phase because of the funding that's involved. We can deal with one landowner. High Realty has been cooperative. We still need to officially gain an agreement with them, but the agreement is currently in draft format with the easements as well for the restoration component as well as the trail. And of the 12-acre site, approximately 5 acres is this restoration or grading exercise where about 1,250 cubic yards of legacy sediment is being removed with this particular site. So this plan is a stormwater management plan, but it does not have any formal stormwater management facilities other than a few crossing pipes under the trail. So it's basically a glorified grading exercise. And then we'll be removing some of the invasive species and planting native plants with the restoration under Land Studies guidance. And then in the future, we'll come back to you with a plan for the proposed trail, which will be, we're proposing that to be asphalt at this time, but that'll be a more formal stormwater management plan because of that impervious area. But this plan has no proposed new impervious area with it. And again, so it's pretty much a glorified grading exercise. And so we are in receipt of DMA's letter dated August 2nd. We did have a meeting with Scott Hain and reviewed the letter. It was a very good meeting with Scott and really no problems addressing the current comments. Tonight, I understand there is one waiver that we're looking for action on. That waiver involves it's section 260-14-A2A. And I'll just, it concerns the existing pre-development non-forested previous areas must be considered meadow in good condition. The applicant is requesting a modification of this requirement and is proposing a pre-development coverages based on actual land use. Our actual land use here is it's lawn, but then we're converting a good portion of that lawn to an actual wetland meadow condition. And so with that justification, we're asking for that modification. I'd be glad, and Jim is here as well, to address any questions, further questions you may have. The other thing I would ask is if you're comfortable and Scott is comfortable, if it's prudent to go ahead and grant us conditional plan approval based on the outstanding comments, I would ask to consider that as well.
Typically do approvals for stormwater plan, or is that just go to the super?
Well, I don't know. I guess this.
Do we
could be
typically do
considered a final
approvals for
plan.
stormwater plans? We don't. It goes to the supervisor
Yeah, you would just act on the relief.
of the waiver.
If there wasn't any relief associated with the plan, it would just be a staff review and approval then. It wouldn't even go to, it wouldn't go to
My
either
bad.
board. So
Yeah.
you talked yourself into some more.
for staff, why do they need this modification? It's defined as meadow now.
There was a typo in the letter. It was supposed to be pervious surface would need to be considered meadow, which would make you possibly have to do some stormwater because of the way the numbers work out in the calculations. But with what they're doing here, it's really beneficial overall, and we didn't feel that that was necessary. They will come back though, as was mentioned, when they put the paved path in, and they're working through some different methods of how they're going to deal with that additional impervious that goes along with that. So we'll see this again when the trail comes in. But really the overall benefit for what they're doing right now, we felt far outweighed having to make them go through some exercise of calculations and maybe doing some small stormwater feature.
And does the township get any benefit from this from a Chesapeake Bay calculation of?
Potentially, there's been some discussions, and I think there's going to be maybe a formula or a way the township could purchase some credits in the future if they need them or desire to. But that's a little bit down the road yet. So probably a couple of years till the township would be considering that.
There's been a number of these projects in the county, I'm not sure beyond that, where you remove the legacy soil that is highly erodible and washes into the bay
Yeah.
and sort of restore it to what we think was the conditions.
Yeah, and
prior to-
East Hempfield's been very fortunate with the Lime Spring project and the one you just saw for Brookside, that the credits that they were able to gather from that through the developer were enough to really help satisfy the requirements of their permit for this 5-year cycle. So we'll be looking at the next cycle as to see what all plays out with that at that point.
So, yeah, I think the projects have been, the other projects I know have been pretty successful so far.
Yes, sir.
So,
And land studies was involved with those as well. And they are with this one also.
okay, I think down at Lampeter was the first one I knew about.
That's right. Down off of Beaver Valley Pike, I believe, right?
Okay, are there any more questions or comments from the commission? All right, I think we're ready for a motion on the modification now.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we recommend to the supervisor's approval of the modification request number 1 for the Barcrest Apartments Stormwater Management Plan, subject to staff and engineer comments.
I'll second it.
Who do we have?
You can take it.
Oh. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr, seconded by Mr. Caldis, that we recommend approval of modification number 1 for the Barcrest Apartment Stormwater Management Plan, subject to staff comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion is unanimous.
I'm abstaining from this one.
Right, okay.
I'm also abstaining from this one.
I work for a high, so.
Mr. Rush and Mr. Boltby are abstaining. So that would be 5-0-2 then.
As long as it passes, I'm fine. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you again.
All right, the final action item for this evening is 2111 Marietta Avenue Apartments.
Amanda Groff with Harbor Engineering here on behalf of Lisa Cooper regarding her property at 2111 Marietta Avenue. I was here back in January for a sketch plan waiver of preliminary, like we saw earlier tonight. So just to briefly remind everyone, since that's been a little while since we came in with the sketch plan, the property is just under 1 acre. It's in the Village Residential District. It's on the north side of Marietta Avenue. The existing lot has a building with 2 apartments and her business, as well as an existing garage, which will be removed. The business will also be removed as part of this project. And she's proposing to construct a new building with 8 apartments, and then renovating the existing building, which will be just 2 apartments, no longer the business, for a total of 10 apartment units. She did previously get variances. That was back in 2021 or 2020, I believe. Everything was approved. As part of the zoning, the client also worked with the supervisors on a deferral of curb and sidewalk along Marietta. So the main thing that changed since we were here with the sketch plan and the waiver of prelim was that we had some additional discussions with both township staff and the emergency service providers regarding the second access drive requirement. So what we ended up doing was widening the existing access drive, which is actually to the east, and it's on the neighboring property. It's currently 18 feet wide, and it serves the 8 townhouses that are on the adjacent property. It is within an existing access easement, which did have provisions for the development of the subject property. So it is still applicable and doesn't need to be updated as part of this plan. So we are now proposing to widen it to 24 feet wide and to install no parking signage. Both of those things will allow us to meet the requirements for a 2 lanes of traffic without on-street parking.
Well, that, just a clarification, will that no parking apply to both sides of that access drive? So
Correct.
on the other property, they won't be able to park either. Is that correct? Okay,
Yeah, I think we have 2 signs on each side.
okay.
The PennDOT permit is in progress for the widening of the existing access drive on the neighboring property. The property is served by public water and sewer, and we are also working with LASA and the Water Authority. So those are both in the works. The disturbance will be less than an acre, and we did get approval for the ENS plan from the Conservation District. And we do have a stormwater infiltration bed to the north or the rear of the property. We are asking for 5 modifications. I can go through those now unless anyone has any questions about the plan before I go into those.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the
And
first
I
one-
would just ask the commissioners that if you have questions as we go through, let's get them out individually instead of waiting until the end, okay?
I'll ask
Just-
a question now if I can then. If that's
Well,
okay.
I talk about the modifications.
I
as we-
had a question on the plan real quick.
We'll come to the plan at the end. And let's go through these. If there's any questions on each modification, ask them, please. Okay. Go ahead.
So the first modification is section 265-5.4B 2(1)A through E, which is in regards to providing detailed survey within 200 feet of the subject tract. So we're asking for relief of that modification. We have detailed survey of the property and limited information surrounding the property. We do have survey of the adjoining access drive and any of the required improvements that are shown. The rest is shown per GIS. The next request is section 265-8.4A1B regarding sidewalks. As I mentioned previously, they did get a deferral of sidewalks along Marietta. This request is specific to 5-foot wide sidewalks that are required along access drives. And the access to the east of the property is considered an access drive. The existing sidewalk to the east, again, on the existing or on the neighboring property is 4 feet wide. So we're asking for a modification of the width to just keep it as existing. And then we're.
This has to do with buffer planning?
No, the sidewalk.
It's number
width.
5. It's number
Yeah.
5 on our list.
Okay, sorry,
Her order is different than ours.
sorry.
Sorry, I guess I should have gone off the order from your letter. So yeah, the next part of that was regarding the proposed sidewalk on the west side, which is on our property. It is offset from the access drive, but it's closer to the units and it allows for the landscape buffer to be between the access drive and the sidewalk. The next one that I have is 265-8.5D1. regarding the second access requirement. This is what I had started to allude to earlier. Since we have more than 100 average daily trips, we're required to have 2 separate access points. The proposed improvements, which would be the 8 apartments plus the 2 existing on the subject property, will generate 139 trips. The total trips to the access drive, which includes the 8 townhouses on the neighboring property, would be up to 191 trips. So we do exceed the 100. But as I mentioned before, we're proposing to widen the access drive from its current 18 feet to 24 feet. And we did submit vehicle movement exhibits that showed that emergency vehicles can access both of the parking lots that are proposed on the subject property to get in and out and maneuver around as needed. The next one that I have is 265-8.7 H2A. This is buffer planting strip A, and that's specific to the eastern property line. Basically, there's a lot of different things that are required in the buffer, and we're asking for an alternative approach to screen the area for the building and the parking. So there is a little bit of a gap to the rear of the site, which is kind of between the parking area and the railroad tracks. We're asking for relief to not provide screening there because that's in the vicinity of the underground stormwater facility, and it's also green space on the subject property. And then there's also a small gap at the front of the property closer to Marietta Avenue. The only proposed improvement in that area is the sidewalk extension to Marietta. So we're just asking that we don't have to provide the buffer planting in that little section. And then the last one that we have is very similar. It's regarding the buffer planting strip B. So this is for the western property line and the northern property line. Again, a lot of different things required. We're requesting an alternative approach on the northern buffer. There's some existing landscaping that's already there. So we're proposing some evergreens to fill in the area where it doesn't meet the 20-foot width requirement. And then on the west side, there's a small area by the dumpster that doesn't have the required width. And so we're proposing some additional evergreens in that area to provide the screening. But in all of those areas, we will provide the required planting. It's just kind of spread out a little bit differently than what's required.
Okay, I didn't hear any questions about the modifications, so go on to the general plan if anybody has questions.
I had a couple questions. First question was, are the parking spaces intended to be marked as specific per unit?
I don't know that they are intending to mark them, no.
Is the building, the reason I ask is for ADA access to all units. And I see steps, what appears to be steps to me. On
Correct,
one
there's
side,
steps to the north there, to that northern parking area.
my question was more that if they get marked, that,
Josh, closer to the mic, please.
my question was more about, if they do get marked, that ensure that, ADA access is available to all units.
Okay.
How does that normally work? That's a good question. With an apartment complex, I mean, how do they satisfy that requirement? Or do they have to select tenants based on
They're
ADA?
required to have so many accessible parking spaces. And they meet that. There is one on the parking lots
Right.
or on the left side.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't,
It's a building code issue for
Yeah.
apartments, a certain
Building code will
percentage.
require all first floor apartments to
Yeah.
be, I believe, type A, ADA units, and then everything on this, if there's second floor units, I think they'd be considered type B.
There are second floor units. There's 4 units on the first floor and 4 on the second. So if they do mark them, they could just make all the second floor on the the northern part.
Yep, yep.
If that would. But I don't know if they don't have to mark them. Is that okay?
I think that's fine. It's just
Okay.
a question that often comes up to
Yeah.
me. In the simple fact that if they get marked, you don't want to restrict somebody that unit A doesn't have a defined space where they can actually get ADA access to their unit.
Okay, understood.
The LCPC had one comment that I noticed about the dumpster enclosure. This plan talks about a pad, but is it going to be fenced, gated?
Was it not for it to not be screened and it wasn't required by the township? So we don't have anything shown right now.
So I thought typically we do require that. Is it just because it's an apartment that we don't have to fence it? Everybody else has it fenced.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember looking at the requirements. I don't know that I have them in. front of
I
me.
I don't believe for this use that it needed to be, but
I can't, I mean, I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
dumpster here would be any less, any more
I
appealing
would
than
have to check
dumpsters
back
on a
in.
Sheet's department store. or
Yeah, I can check back in the ordinance
Pass by.
and confirm that.
Yeah, 5 by 5 pass by area.
Yeah. We can touch base after the meeting if
Yeah.
that's okay with you.
Yeah. It will work with them and
Yeah,
check on
I
that.
think, just accidents will happen and there'll be stuff blowing around or
Yeah.
they'll get in the dumpster and it'll be in the neighbor's yard. Actually, it won't. It'll blow this way. That's okay. All right, are there any more questions? Any other areas for discussion?
What's the front? What's the length of the front of the property?
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And your sidewalk that is, you're proposing to be 4 foot. Are you asking not to put in a sidewalk or keep the existing, or are you going to put in a new sidewalk and then have it just 4 foot?
So are you talking about the modification request?
Yes.
So that's actually specific to the access drive that goes between the two properties, and the 4 foot is the existing one that's shown on like the bottom side of the page.
Okay.
We're just requesting to not widen it to 5 feet on that side. And then on the western side of that access drive, we're asking for relief to push the sidewalk not next to the access drive, basically to have that 15-foot buffer between the access drive and the sidewalk.
Great. I thought that you, with sidewalks, if you keep it at 4 foot, if it's a certain amount of distance of 200 feet, that you need a turnaround at least, is that the case?
It's
for
250 or
HDA, for
500.
ADA?
It's 250 or 500. I can't remember the exact
200.
distance.
200?
Every 200.
Every
feet, you need
200 to 5 by
pass
5 area. Yeah.
I don't know what that distance is there.
But I think they'd be okay.
Yeah, I think because it's all existing, that's why we were asking for the relief to keep it at the 4 feet.
A lot of times you can also use like that sidewalk there crosses different areas of pavement. and
Yeah,
that
you're allowed to use
pavement can
driveways,
count
driveway
as
aprons
the
and
5
stuff.
by 5
Yeah.
pass by. All right.
Anything else? All right, then let's take a look at the motion, at the modifications first, please. I believe all 5 are recommended to be granted. I'll say rather unconditionally.
I'll make a recommendation to approve the 5 modifications requested.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
And that's subject to staff and engineer comment.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bowlby, seconded by Mrs. Will, that we recommend approval of the 5 modifications for 2111 Marietta Avenue, subject to the staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So that would be unanimous, 7-0. And then on the final plan itself, please.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the final land development plan for 2111 Marietta Ave apartments, subject to staff and engineering comments.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Will, second by Mr. Caldus, that we recommend approval of the final land development plan for 2111 Marietta Avenue Apartments, subject to staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? So that would be unanimous as well. Okay, thank you. All right, the next agenda item this evening is to go back over the zoning ordinance text amendments that were discussed at the last meeting. My recollection is that there was discussion, especially on 3 items. One was RV storage or recreational vehicle storage in residential properties. The second had to do with the hours of operation for home businesses, I believe specifically with impact. And the third one was parking setback and requirements in the village, residential village, whatever the 2 zones were. Those 3 items were reviewed with what we call a planning group, which included 2 supervisors, Mr. Detter, me, staff, and engineers. And we also had 2, or I guess 1 zoning officer at the meeting as well. So we didn't do anything, took no actions. It was just a discussion. But out of that, we have the revised modification or revised text amendments that are in front of us this evening to be voted on. In general, Julie, we decided not to change the requirement for setback of RV parking. And we decided not to change the hours of operation for home businesses. Again, the zoning officer, his comment was that like 99% of the time it stops at 9 o'clock. If somebody happens to tarry a little late, there's really no enforcement unless it really becomes unmanageable or a nuisance to the neighbors. So they didn't think they would not recommend moving it later in the day, just by right for everybody. So that's why that one stayed the same. Yeah, as for the parking, what was the change there? You guys went back and looked at it.
We went to a 3-foot
3-foot
offset.
setback.
Yeah,
Or side yard.
And 3 from the side and rear.
yeah, 5 from the front and 3 from the side
I
and
think
rear.
originally it was 10 from the front, 5 from the other 3 sides of the property, which I thought might be a little restrictive on some of those smaller lots. And so they made it now 5 feet in front, 3 foot on the other 3 sides. Which I think will give us a little more chance of reusing some of these older, smaller lots in the villages. On the sides, yeah. So what we need to do is make a motion on whether we want to recommend those to the supervisors.
Just a clarifying question.
Sure.
Before, the draft revisions were amending the definition of recreational vehicle to include motorcycle.
I don't know.
The portion that mentioned motorcycles was speaking about the trailer,
Okay,
like hauling trailers.
I think maybe that was the intent, but it wasn't clear in how that was written, because it,
It was written like trailers that handle, and it said like motorcycle bikes.
it said trailers.
ATVs.
Yeah, I don't think it differentiates. It looked like it was reading, I don't have the full draft in front of me. Just that was kind of,
For the record, I just want to make a few statements if I can.
Sure.
After our last meeting and I spoke out pretty voicefully about the home-based businesses. I went home and I talked to my wife, and across the street from us in a neighboring development, somebody recently put in a salon, and my wife has become friends with her. So both of them are bouncing things in my ears about the regulations, and then we start talking about this kind of stuff, and this timing issue, I truthfully don't feel that it should be present. Our regulations already state that you can only have a one-chair salon. One visitor coming to get their hair cut at 9:30 is no different than your neighbor having a guest at 9:30. Has very little impact. And I will tell you that, I'm going to be quite frank, in today's world of inflation and jobs, hairstylists don't make a ton of money. This is one of the few ways hairstylists can stay present in the world. It's hard to open a commercial salon and make a ton of money. So a lot of hairstylists are looking for at-home business options to stay afloat and make a living. It's not an easy job. And if you take a half hour, an hour off of their nights, 5 nights a week, that's a significant impact to those people that don't work a lot of daytime hours because they don't come. So those are the things I hear. After I spoke last week, I would have hoped that the committee would have reached out to me, knowing that I have an at-home business and wanted to hear a little bit more. I was a little upset that nobody reached out to me and said, hey, you have firsthand experience with this. What are your thoughts? What are you hearing? I've been in this situation for 16 years at my residence now. I'm not sure, and I can't speak to whether anybody else on the committee has an at-home business, if they have firsthand experience, and they're not all hair salons. I understand that. But what I will say is hair salons are one of the top things that people like to take as an at-home business that has traffic. So I just wanted to say that it is what it is. I understand, but I needed to feel like I said what I had to say.
We did discuss it at the planning group, and it did come down to it. This applies, as you said, to all at-home businesses. So that was one of the things that we had discussed, that everybody felt that going through the previous zoning hearing board decisions for the special exceptions that were given, 9 o'clock was the majority of the time periods that were outlined in historical zoning hearing board decisions, and that is what they felt everybody was comfortable with going with. So we hear what you're saying on that. And there was discussion about it for
Yeah,
a
I
while.
mean, we mentioned your comments specifically,
Yeah.
just as we mentioned Julie's and mine on the 3 subjects. And I think we fairly represented, your comments. It wasn't just that it was out of the blue, but I think especially the zoning hearing officers, I think, felt that there hasn't been a lot of problems with, like I said, going over the 9 o'clock or whatever. But if you approve it and you make it 10 o'clock and then it becomes 11 o'clock and then, and if it's only 1 chair salon, it's probably not going to be a problem. The neighbors aren't going to complain that car's parked there for an extra half hour or whatever. So I'm not saying violate the ordinance, but it hasn't been a problem. I don't think the township has had a lot of enforcement issues with that.
No, and the one thing to keep in mind too is that we're taking something that's now, if you want to open a beauty salon, you have to go to zoning hearing board for a special exception and pay the money and prove your case. With this, you're you're by right up till 9 o'clock. And that, the 9 o'clock, based on the chair of the zoning hearing board who was at the meeting, said that was the time that they would typically give people, unless there was some extenuating circumstances that they may consider going later. But across the board, they generally went to 9 o'clock. And then the thing also to remember is that if you're not happy with the 9, you're always welcome to go to the zoning hearing board and get relief, try and get relief of that. But the idea was to simplify this process for the person like that wanted to open the beauty salon. Now they can just do it as long as they meet all the requirements of the ordinance.
As you know, suggesting to somebody that they can go get zoning relief requires you prove a hardship.
Sure.
That's different than a modification or a waiver. It's not the same. The likelihood of getting that is slim. How do you prove a hardship on timing? So to suggest that it's not happening, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is
And
not
like I said,
happening.
the zoning hearing board chair said you were going to get 9 o'clock if you were coming to them anyway.
Correct, but I'm saying, why are we adding? Why are we adding the definition if it doesn't need to be there? Let's not add things that aren't creating problems now. If you're telling me now they're getting a ton of complaints and concerns about timing issues with at-home businesses, I can see why we're adding it then. But if that's not the case, why are we adding something to an ordinance that just to add it?
Well, I guess if it's not there, if it's not in the ordinance, then it has to go to the zoning hearing board. And we're saying, we're trying to eliminate the number of times that any applicant has to go to the zoning hearing board for something that is, I'll say, rather routine.
Well, they're gonna have to go to the zoning hearing board anyway for an at-home business for the use, right?
No, this all becomes by right.
They're eliminating
Yeah, so you're eliminating going to the zoning hearing board at all.
So by right, you can just start a business without doing anything by coming to the municipality.
As long as it meets the requirements that are set forth
If
in the
I wanted
new,
to start cutting hair.
so they took
Wanted to
all
start
of,
cutting
they
hair,
took
you
all
can
of the
do it.
conditions.
But right now you could do it till, if you wanted to do it, you could, right now you could do it till 10 o'clock.
No,
No.
can't do it at all.
You have to go to the zoning hearing board now.
They have to go to the zoning hearing board to get approval to open the
Okay,
business.
but if this regulation wasn't in the ordinance, you could do it till 10 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
No, 9 o'clock. It hasn't been adopted yet so that it's by right.
Okay, but I'm saying if we don't add the hours, you could do it till.
You
10
don't add
o'clock.
the hours, you could do it till 2 AM.
Yes, that's what I'm
That's
saying.
not what
yeah.
we
And,
want.
and
We want some.
since it's by right now, I think the zoning officer needs something to fall back on if somebody starts complaining. Saying, hey, there's people coming and going till 11 o'clock at night. He can now issue something saying, hey, by right, you can only have hours till 9 AM
But you'll never
or
get.
9 PM, sorry.
Okay, so I live in a residential house, residentially zoned out in the middle of nowhere. I want to put my salon in and I want to have people there till 11. I'm never going to get relief for a hardship. And how does it affect anybody? Why are we setting?
Because you're not the only,
You-
there's more people that live next to residences, not out in the boonies somewhere, that will object to that. Okay, so we need to make sure we're covering
But if
the
you don't have, it-
majority of them.
if you don't put it by right, you have the right to cover that, is what I'm saying.
No, if it's.
Because you have to go to zoning and request
correct.
the use and then they can put a condition.
That's right. They can't, and we're trying to eliminate that. We're trying to make it more streamlined for that person.
I'm not a big proponent of putting things into the ordinance that restrict every scenario right off the bat. I'm just not.
It's restricted right now.
It's not allowed right
It's not
now.
allowed right.
Well,
now.
it is by special exception.
But yeah, by special exception, but then that means you got a process to go through. So this is helping, I'll say the majority of the people get into home business without having to go to the
Without having
zoning
to go
hearing
through a
board.
special exception.
Yeah, you're changing it from going from a special exception, which the person did right across the street from me and
Okay.
did. So it is allowed. But you got to go through a special exception. And then they apply conditions.
That is correct.
So if that particular person lived out in the middle of nowhere, they could go in front of the zoning hearing board and say, what's it matter if I work to 9 or 10? And they could make a special decision for that
They still
person.
can't, they still can. If they want to go past 9 o'clock, they can still go to zoning hearing and say, hey, I'm out here next to the cows and the horses and nobody's going to care if I work till 2 in the morning.
Okay,
So
well, I'm
extend.
just, I'm just saying that it's totally different when you go in for a use like that than when you go for a variance. The requirements for a variance are totally different.
That's true.
Understand.
But the 9 o'clock is guaranteed at this point.
Okay, I'm just,
But we understand where you're coming from, Jeff.
Yep.
You know, you can vote however you like to. vote.
Yeah, we have an in-home business. I guess for our business, I don't think the 9 o'clock's a factor, but every business is different and I understand his concerns.
What's the start time? Is there a start time? Like not before 7 a.m.?
7 a.m. or something?
9:01 PM.
Well, I'm saying you can start at night, but what's the earliest you can start?
I
believe it's 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Our neighbors started. That's
Just kind of curious. So all the people that have hair salons that have gotten it through zoning hearing, does that piece of paper just go out the window now and it reverts to the ordinance, or what happens?
They'd still be under the requirements of their decision that they had.
Unless the ordinance was less restrictive than their decision, probably, correct?
Think so, yeah.
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 Now, if
otherwise
their
they could-
time said that they could go to 10 o'clock, just using that as an example, not saying that any do,
Then they have that.
then they have it till 10.
Yeah.
But if their decision said they could only go till 6 o'clock, they would be able to go till 9 o'clock. I think that's the
So
way.
just say, hey, I'm shutting my business down. I'm gonna start it up tomorrow
Yeah.
under the ordinance instead of the.
Yeah.
zoning
That is a
hearing.
little bit of a solicitor question,
Yeah,
probably.
but I think if it becomes less restrictive by right, they would revert to that.
So if the zoning hearing board put restrictions on what they could sell, those restrictions would remain.
This is just changing the
Doesn't change any of that.
times.
I think the home-based business definition already limits retail sales to a certain or use to a certain percentage of the dwelling anyway.
Yeah.
And those other restrictions didn't change.
All right, further discussion?
I do like boats and campers and I
agree.
think they're fun, but I understand that others don't, so.
Well, I think other people like boats and campers too, Julie. I think
Yeah,
the discussion was more about, do we want them in front of the buildings?
Yeah.
In the residential zones, and that's what it boiled down to, is that, and during the meeting, several people mentioned, oh, this guy has this, and he's got, gigantic 40-foot RV right in the front yard, and that's generally not what we want to see.
And I think there's, certainly lots of different ways to be unsightly outside of the RVs. Just one thing I thought was a little ironic is that we approved U-Haul and we're adding tons of pavement to store boats and campers and RVs, when people could just be keeping them at their house. But that's all right. Agree to disagree.
Right. And, I appreciate everybody's
Mhm.
discussion. I think we should have more discussions instead of just, unanimous decisions. So I respect everybody's opinion and I encourage future discussions. But if there's no further comments, then we do need to take a motion on the text amendments.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to recommend adoption of the zoning ordinance text amendments, subject to all staff and engineering comments.
I will second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Detter, seconded by Mr. Caldus, that we recommend approval of, or adoption, I should say, of the zoning ordinance text amendments, township file number 22-13.0, subject to staff and engineer comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So it would be 5-2. with Mrs. Will and Mr. Bolte. Okay. Doesn't look like we have any public comments on there.
I had one follow-up comment. We did a little bit of digging in the meantime and found out that dumpster enclosures are not required in the village zones. They are in most of the other zones, but for whatever reason, not in the village.
Sounds like a text amendment.
Yeah.
Let's go.
They need to be screened, and they are screening it, but not, but with landscape is an acceptable option to screen them, yeah. So they are okay the way
Thank you for
they
checking.
presented it, yeah.
Like the new computer.
Yes, thank you. They're your personal copies if you want to take it. Just bring it back next meeting.
And he said each time, each month you'll have a new one, so just.
This is very.
Just stockpile them.
Like a throw, it's like a throw.
Getting metal detectors back there.
So if there's nothing else to come before the commission, the meeting is adjourned at 8:14. Or thereabouts. Hey, you told me back in the meeting, that you're looking at rezoning the property. that's in area. Big on that half of what I live in. I kind of went.
Plans? Yeah, so you have to go to the recorder of deeds office.
It is.